GM in the mix. We'll discuss some of the rumors today about the Charlotte Hornets and their personnel decisions. And yeah, we're going to dive into some Bobcats history. It's that type of show today on Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube, where you can see Doug jamming. You can also read him jamming on his boxscore.com, Every Hornets Boxscore.com. That's his substack you should be reading already. And you can check me out on the radio, sports radio, 92.7 WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. Got to check in, Doug. Are you smiling because you're happy? What are you smiling about right now? Is there any reason in particular?
Oh, well, I'm smiling because I'm with you on a Friday, a fun Friday. Got my soundboard ready.
Now we can officially start the show.
Yeah, we're doing Who Wore It Best later in the show. My tabs that I have open right now, I've gone down multiple rabbit holes before we started this show. I can just give you a quick rundown of my tabs. I've got the Charlotte Bobcats top 10 plays of the 2012 season. I've got the 2014 NBA draft up. I've got the 2000-2001 Dallas Mavericks roster and stats open.
Oh, I love it.
And I've got Flip Murray's basketball reference page open.
Okay, that makes me happy. I like Flip Murray more than you might realize. I considered him at the time the Kenny Lofton of the NBA because there were just these one-year mercenary trips that he would take for each NBA franchise to go cook the opposition, and then he would move on. Love me some Ronald Flip Murray.
Well, and he was named not by Jamal Crawford, Jordan Crawford. I saw an interview with him from the Dan Le Batard show because Jordan is in the Big Three right now. And they were asking Jordan Crawford to name his top 3 bucket getters. And he named Flip Murray. Flip Murray was a guy known for just sort of that, his effective field goal percentage. You don't want to look at those numbers. You don't want to dig into the advanced stats. But was a guy that one possession, if you needed him to hit a tough shot over good defense, was, a guy you looked at.
Yeah, so Flip played 4 years with Seattle, and then every single year after that, played for a different team until he was 30. Every single, it was a beautiful thing.
I'm also smiling because you mentioned that it was going to be a Bobcats kind of show. I looked at my hat rack. I've got a lot of hats, but I do not have a Bobcats hat, strangely. I've just never come across one that I wanted to buy, that I wanted to add to the collection. But a friend of mine recently moved and wanted to not move a bunch of bobbleheads. So instead, he gave me a bunch of bobbleheads, and 3 of them were Bobcats. It was a Kemba Walker. It was I think it was an Al Jefferson bobblehead that was a Bobcat one, and then an MKG one. And this was sent via USPS, and they were not very kind to this package. And so some of them sustained damage. I had to super glue them back together. Ironically, the one that survived unscathed, no injuries to this bobblehead, was Michael Kidd Gilchrist, the Iron bobblehead.
I love the fact that the NBA was serving as the UPS delivery man and just destroyed the Charlotte Bobcats without coming out unscathed. So that's unfortunate. We'll talk about Bobcats a little bit later. Yeah, we led the show off with Flip Murray. That's the kind of show it's going to be today. There is some news, though, to discuss, some serious news from Jake Fischer, your boy. Doug, hit it.
We're going fishing. We got a big one.
All right, Jake Fischer wrote about the Charlotte Hornets and Brooklyn assistant general manager Jeff Peterson. And that same Jeff Peterson has emerged as one of the most respected young executives in the NBA. Fischer said, quote, Peterson is hailed for his authenticity, particularly in his ability to communicate up and down the organizational chart. And in 2020, Peterson interviewed for the Pistons general manager opening with new ownership structure in Charlotte. That very guy, should the Hornets ultimately move on from Mitch Kupchak after the final year of his contract, Peterson has become widely linked by league personnel as a possible next lead executive in Charlotte. I like how he kind of buried the lead and was describing, he was giving the buildup. He said, and from North Carolina, standing 6'6", instead of just telling us the Charlotte Hornets might be interested in Jeff Peterson. Here he is. It doesn't matter. Jake Fischer's the professional. What say you on that write-up?
Well, Jake Fischer also just the Charlotte Hornets newsbreaker. There is no one that rivals him in this. And I think it's because there aren't a lot of rivals to break Charlotte Hornets news in general. I'm sure there's not a lot of like people breaking down the door to figure out what's going on with the Charlotte Hornets. But Fischer has carved the lane. It makes me wonder if part of his insider access isn't someone from this new organization, from the new front office that's going to be taking over for Michael Jordan, the Plotkin Schnall group. But yeah, Jeff Peterson has been part of a Nets organization that has had to navigate some weird stuff over the past couple of years in terms of bringing in big stars and then all of those big stars one by one wanting to leave the organization. And you would have thought that after all those big stars would have left, that the Brooklyn Nets would have been in shambles as an organization, but they haven't been. And I think you have to give the front office there, whether that was solely, I don't know what part Jeff Peterson played in that, but you just look at that and you go, wow, Brooklyn they got good value for those tough situations that they were in, having to ship those players out. And they've got a team that has a good little core nucleus that is competitive in the Eastern Conference. I think that this team overall in the Charlotte Hornets needs a shakeup in the front office sooner rather than later. Whether they give, Kupchak the year because that's when his contract ends for financial reasons, fine. But, I think the sooner that they can start to clean house, get aggressive, and not waste any time making this organization better, more creative, new ideas, fresh ideas, I think the better off the Hornets will be.
Yeah, so this guy, very young. In fact, he was on the NBA's 40 under 40 list, and that is the list comprising some of the executives and coaches and agents shaping the basketball world and the future. This written by Mike Vorkunov of The Athletic, and this was just last year in 2002. He wrote this list. He's only 34 years old. Jeff Peterson, very young, and I think Sean Marks, the GM of the Brooklyn Nets, hired Peterson in 2019, and they lured him from the Hawks after having been impressed by his easy rapport with others, his warm interactions with him, and the relentlessness which he worked. I can't read today, but yes, that's exactly what was going on with Jeff Peterson.
That sounds like a Hallmark card.
I know the warmness. Like, do you want your NBA GM to be warm?
You do. No, this is actually a good thing that you said that.
I know,
because part of the problem of the Rich Cho era was that I think it was reported sort of behind the scenes that he wasn't warm enough, that there was a little bit of interpersonal issues in terms of him working with other executives in the league, but also even within the organization. And we often talk about, both with general managers and with coaches, how there's often, when you move on from someone, the next pick is sort of a reaction pick. This happens in voting as well, too, like our government, our leadership. We often we like stability, and then once we get tired of stability, we want somebody to come in and shake it up. It's always a reaction to the past person. And so I think it would make sense, if they do move on from Kupchak, to look at somebody that is younger, that may bring some more creative ideas, that may have some closer relationships with modern NBA players, younger NBA players, that it would make a lot of sense. If Jeff Peterson were the hire at some point, it would make a lot of sense. And you mentioned Atlanta too there, and Rick Schnall obviously was one of the minority investors in the Atlanta Hawks before now moving to the Charlotte Hornets.
Well, yeah, and at 27, this guy has just been in the NBA as soon as he could be. At 27 years old, Peterson was named an assistant general manager, which forced him to learn how to manage above and below him. And you hear Sean Marks. There are reports about him leaning on Peterson for a lot of different things, being a sounding board, a relationship, a conduit between him and the players, relying on him and his scouting ability. And apparently Peterson is someone that does empower his scouts because he's from that background. So, yeah, actually surprising the amount of information you can find on this guy, despite him just kind of floating out in the universe as a rumored potential hire. But it makes all the sense in the world, especially with what you mentioned in the Hawks connection.
All of that sounds good. I think they should also look for, in their next general manager, if this is Jeff Peterson, great, but they should look for someone who can communicate what the Hornets as an organization can do to make this team better. and not so much communicate what this team is unable to do. I would like, both from the ownership perspective and from the general manager front office perspective, tell me what this team can do. Because I think coaches do that pretty well. Coaches can get realistic at times, but coaches, I think, have an attitude of like, I'm going to tell you what we can achieve. I don't know if we're going to get there, but I'm going to tell you what we can achieve. And that's what I want to hear from the front office as well. I haven't heard that in the past couple of years.
All right, so some changes atop the Hornets hierarchy, for sure coming with ownership, but possibly coming with a new GM. Jeff Peterson, a new candidate that could be in play to be that new GM once Mitch Kupchak's contract ends. Let's talk more. Not Hornets, but Bobcats. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep
the
on the
hardcore fans hanging around for this one, I could tell.
Yeah, I was about to say, a tease is supposed to keep you around. I don't know if
No, you want to stay. You want to stay. I
Okay.
guarantee you want to stay for this.
All right, well, I'll just let that be the tease. Doug, with a guarantee that you are going to want to stay for this next segment, and I'll just leave that tease and let that do the work for me. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can take your first swing at betting on the MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right, just $20, and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run, all on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on the MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Sign up today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
Is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. That was. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes
it seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Oh, there it is. If you're watching on YouTube in all its glory, there's something about that color orange that does it for the Bobcats. It is so in your face. It is the old school logo. There was a tweet from Hoop Central that asked, what is the first player you think of when you see this logo? And then it is the bright, like also dirty, burnt Charlotte Bobcat orange staring you in the face. And some of the answers were fantastic, as there, you know how that's named the most random player for this logo. Well, sure. The great thing about the Bobcats logo is that they're all pretty damn random. What were some of the answers that people wrote in, Doug?
Well, the top one, it doesn't have the most likes, but the top one sitting on my timeline, because I think, X or Twitter or whatever, the algorithm knows me. And it put BJ Mullins, Byron Mullins, which is my answer, by the way. I don't know what your answer is, but first Bobcat I think of is Byron Mullins, and I think of him dunking all over LaMarcus Aldridge in that game against the Portland Trail Blazers, my top Bobcats play of all time. I don't know what's your answer before I go through these.
Yeah, I mean, I would never tweet that. I would tweet out something way more funny than this. But I believe Al Jefferson would probably be. No, Gerald Wallace. Gerald Wallace would be my first name. Yeah, Gerald Wallace is my first mention that I have.
Well, that's what Bucket Squad says. The only right answer, and posting a picture of Gerald Wallace. A lot of Emeka Okafor, some Kemba. But yeah, I mean, and those are going to be your answers. It's going to be Gerald. It's going to be Kemba. It's going to be maybe a couple Bizzes in there.
Maybe Steven Jackson, Jay Rich, because they were the best players on some of those teams. Like Jay Rich wasn't there a long time, but
I think the problem with Jay Rich and Stack Jack are that a lot of people had given up on the Bobcats by then. Unfortunately, I think they didn't come in, and you get like a 2 or 3 year buffer as a franchise, a new franchise, to do something, and they didn't do anything of significance. And I think a lot of people walked away before that playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, Jack had a playoff appearance, so if you just go based off the most success they would have, it'd probably be Steven Jackson and Gerald Wallace. But I'm with you. It's tough. All right, but that's not why we're playing this game. Why are we doing this, Doug?
Well, because when I saw this, it came at the same time. Serendipitous, you could call it. It came at the same time that I was browsing YouTube. And this is, again, all about algorithms. For the Al Jefferson algorithms. They were working. There we go. Thank you. Big algorithm. They were working overtime on YouTube as well, because I was scrolling through YouTube and it served me the 2012 Bobcats top 10 plays. Okay.
Sorry about that. That's a bad mistake.
I meant to hit the fanfare there. There it goes. Okay. The 2012 Bobcats top 10 plays. This, for the uninitiated, is the 2011-2012 Bobcat season, 7-59, a strike or lockout shortened year, the worst record by percentage of all time in the NBA. Most consider this to be the very worst team. And also an easy way to get a lot of views on YouTube, I found, is to do any kind of, I don't want to even say documentary. You just put a 15-minute video describing how bad they were. You call it the worst team in the NBA, and you put some pictures up of Michael Jordan going, whoa, like, you know, doing the like, what's going on face.
Yeah.
And you've got at least 250,000 views on YouTube. I don't know why we haven't done this yet. But anyway, the NBA in that year found 10 plays. And the game I would like to play is, can you guess the top play of the 2011-2012 7-59 Charlotte Bobcats? All I want is the player and what happened. Give me some candidates. Give me some candidates.
Well,
here.
so the first thing I thought of was the Bobcats famously won the first game of the season that year. They beat Milwaukee. I don't think they won off of any game-winning shot. In fact, I've looked this up before. I think it was just a whole bunch of free throws to solidify that victory. So I mean, is it a DJ Augustine or Kemba Walker type thing that happened against Milwaukee? That's the best I got for you, Doug. Like, I don't have a huge bank of 2012 Bobcats plays.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Kemba Walker, not a bad guess, although it was early in his career, and so he wasn't getting as much play as he would later on when it was guaranteed that a majority of your top plays in your season were going to be Kemba Walker. But I think I only counted one Kemba Walker crossover on the Detroit Pistons. Okay. In this top 10 list. He also had an assist that turned into a Bismack Biyombo dunk. And then I think there were several Corey Maggette plays. Maggette and meatballs. A couple of dunks there from Maggette that made the top 10 list as well. And then two Byron Mullins dunks were on this top 10 list as well.
Byron Mullins dunks would be a safe answer as well. I thought, because it's not just the LaMarcus Aldridge one that he had. Were there any? There wasn't any game-winning shot or anything like that, right? I mean, was there any winning time thing?
Well, there was, and it was the number one play of the 2011-2012 Bobcat season. It was not a game-winning shot. It was a game-winning block by Bismack Biyombo in a 73-71 victory by the Charlotte Bobcats over the New Orleans Hornets.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful.
That was your top play. Your top play was Bismack Biyombo getting the block.
I would have gone like I was hoping for some Euro step or something like that from Bismack. Yeah, I really didn't have any plays in the bank, Doug. I mean, when you were looking at this, did you remember any of them? Was your memory, jogged by anything? I mean, yeah.
I remember Corey Maggette. I mean, I don't remember any of his plays, but I mean,
you were just.
But I recall the Bobcats acquiring Corey Maggette, and I then, as a fan, not a podcaster, going, huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to have a sick Orlando Magic Corey Maggette basketball card, and young Walker was thrilled for that Walker, although he wasn't collecting cards anymore. That's what I have on Corey Maggette.
Yeah, and I think as a former Hornets fan at the time, I was excited, at the fact that they had brought back Paul Silas. And then crushed by the end of that season, understanding that Paul Silas had only been, he rescued the team the year prior, but had only been brought back really to like rescue that team and then take the bullet for that season. And then, of course, they moved on to Mike Dunlap, which was a disaster. And then after that, moved on to Clifford. But it did, going back to the tabs that I had open earlier in the show, the 2001 Dallas Mavericks, I had that open because I was looking at the net rating for that 11-12 Bobcats team, and it was minus 15.2. So my curiosity was sparked, and I said, is that the worst net rating of all time? I had an inkling that it probably was.
Yeah.
But it actually was tied with the 1992-93 Dallas Mavericks for the worst net rating. So your offensive rating versus your defensive rating, you calculate those numbers together, pretty simple. Negative 15.2. They were essentially getting blown out by 15 points per 100 possessions. So the Dallas Mavericks, and so then I went to look and see, like, how long did it take them to get better? And they were essentially miserable through the entire 90s. They made a couple of good draft picks. They drafted Mashburn and then Kidd, but then they made a couple of really bad draft picks, Cherokee Parks, Sean Bradley, and they couldn't put together enough draft picks to really get things going in the 90s until the late 90s when they bring in Steve Nash, they get Dirk Nowitzki, and they start to hit, and then they finally find their coach in Don Nelson. And by 2000, 2001, they had put together a 50-win team, something that the new iteration of this franchise has been yet unable to do. But it made me wonder, Walker, and this is my question, were the Hornets bad for long enough? Because, Clifford comes into that Bobcats year and leads them to 43 wins and a playoff appearance where they get blown out, and they get the 9th pick in the 2014 draft. But I don't know that they were bad long enough. They were really bad for 2 seasons, but were they bad long enough?
I mean, I think probably, to be honest with you, I think the answer is probably yes to that. Well, plus it's just like the namesake. I mean, you mentioned a couple of players, and Jason Kidd and Jamal Mashburn. Jamal Mashburn is, as you don't like where I rank him in the top 35 list, but he still is, in the top half of Charlotte Hornets of all time. And I don't know if Jamal Mashburn would rank among the top half of any Dallas Maverick of all time. Maybe he would. I don't know. I haven't done that list. We'll leave that for Nick Angstad. But we're going to move on to the last segment, one also that Doug has been working very hard on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Who wore it best? We used to do this with Fire or Fizzle, I believe, as well. That has now since been taken and been used by the Wes and Walker show in Uptown Charlotte from 12 to 3 p.m. So you should totally check that one out. But we're going to go with Who Wore It Best coming up next. Final segment, Locked On Hornets.
This is Locked On Hornets.
Golden State spent almost a minuscule amount of time with 0 of their starters out on the floor. They had at least one out there the entire time.
You have 4 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, they do.
And so you just put them anywhere.
You just have one out there.
Stack them up.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, Doug, who is the first person, the first player? What outfit are you wanting to start this game off with?
Yeah, before we get to that, I got to run down this entire list. It's going to take me a little bit because we did this last offseason, but we didn't finish it. We got to jersey number 23. So I'll explain the rules and I'll explain the list in a minute. But I did want to note that the Hornets, despite winning a little bit too much too early, in my opinion, the Bobcats, that is, to secure some better draft picks, at least that 14 draft wasn't loaded. That was the Joel Embiid went 3rd. And Wiggins went 1st, Jabari Park. There were so many landmines in this draft. Like, if you look at the value over replacement player, there just aren't many good ones and a lot of negatives in the top, in that lottery selection. And in fact, the Hornets managed to land on a landmine with the 9th pick. They selected Noah Vonleh, who was a minus 0.7 value over replacement player. And the big winner, the big prize of that draft went number 41 overall. It was Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
So there was no winning in that draft, I don't think, unless you were.
By the way, I like how I had it in my head different. Who wore it best? I forgot. I did not describe this game very well because this is not what we did Fire Fizzle with.
I was wondering what you were talking about, but I just decided to let you go for it. It's been a long week.
Well, that was the outfit that we would say who wore it best, and we would have these crazy outfits that the guys would stroll into the arena wearing. But no, this is we are bringing this back from last year. I like how we started this last offseason, didn't finish it, and then went all season, not addressing it whatsoever, not once. And now here we are in silly season, bringing it back baby. Right where we left off. I love it.
All right, so over the next few weeks in August, by the way, 3 shows a week in August. So, if we're not on for a day, That's why we're taking a little break in August. A well-deserved break, I think. After talking about this offseason where not a lot has happened, I think we deserve a break in August. But over the next few weeks, we're going to be putting every jersey number in Hornets history under the microscope from 98 to 00. We'll be asking the question, who wore it best? And we typically, if we don't know, like if it's a little bit on the line, which a lot of these aren't, a lot of these have pretty clear answers, but if one's on the line, we're going to post the poll on YouTube, and you can head over to youtube.com/@LockedOnHornets and click that community tab to vote in those polls. Here are the rules, Walker. We can only take into account their time in Charlotte wearing the uniform, and only when they wore that jersey number, because we've had a few players who switched jersey numbers, and so you can only consider that time frame in which they wore the jersey. So without further ado, let me quickly run down the list of who wore it best so far. Number 98, Arnaldus Kubicka. Number 55, Chris Douglas. Yeah, I'll give you a tiny little space to make a comment here. Chris Douglas Roberts, number 55.
CDR.
Number 54, Lee Nailon.
Oh, Nailin' Lee Nailon.
No, Nails. It was Nails. That was his nickname.
I said what I said. Nailin' Lee Nailon.
Number 52, Matt Geiger.
The Geigmeister.
The Geiger counter. Oh, my God. Number 50, Emeka Okafor.
What'd you say?
Emeka Okafor, number 50.
Becky.
Number 45, Armin Gilliam.
The Hammer.
Yeah, there you go. You got it. Number 44, Derek Coleman.
Nobody likes him.
Number 43, Anthony Tolliver. Everybody likes
marksman.
him. Everybody likes him. Mm-hmm. We all love Anthony Tolliver. We all did. Number 42, PJ Brown.
Defensive menace.
Man, we need a PJ Brown, don't we?
Love
don't we,
PJ
folks? We love PJ Brown, don't we, folks? Number 41, Glenn Rice.
Just a god. I love Glenn Rice so much.
Number 40, Cody Zeller.
How's his nose?
Number 39, Tom Tolbert.
Baldy.
No, Tommy T with the frosted tips.
He also
Number
went bald.
That's true. Well, after you go the frosted tips, there's only one way to go after that. You've hit it's like once you get to the top of the mountain, there's only one way to go after that. You gotta go down.
And that's straight bald.
Number 35, Gerald Glass.
The Glass Man.
No, world-class Glass.
Yeah, I never would have gotten it.
Number 34, J.R. Reed.
Baby Jordan.
Number 33,
Not
Alonzo
really,
Mourning.
So.
Number 32, Hersey Hawkins.
Hersey.
3-point shooter. We compared him to Malik Monk, or we compared Malik Monk to Hersey Hawkins.
Hersey Hawkins, yeah, he'll be on the list, by the way. Top 35 list of all time. He was good.
Number 31, Kurt Rambis.
Goggles. We see you.
Number 30, Del Curry.
The best ambassador in organization history, I think. I think that's correct.
Bring your kid. Number 27, Dwayne Jones. I think that was a winner by default.
I think that's who wore it worst.
25, Al Jefferson.
Big Al.
Number 24.
Marketing campaign, the best one too. Big Al's paint. Fantastic.
Number 24, Jamal Mashburn.
That's your boy.
And number 23, Jason Richardson.
You know, pretty damn good during his 80, not even 80 games that he played here. Jason Richardson, man, underappreciated. Man, I didn't realize we had done that many. What is the next number on the list for us, Doug?
Well, the next number, I think we're sequential at this point. I don't think we skip many numbers down to 00. Okay. So we're going on to number 22, the Deuces, double Deuces. And we got a pretty long list here. It's not a star-studded list, but it is one of the longer lists of players. We've got Ralph Lewis, 1989. We've got Johnny Newman, 1991 to 1994, the Dookie, the Duke product. Tom Chambers at 1997. Spent a year, cup of coffee.
Forgot about his. Yeah, forgot about.
Well, Tom Chambers run. Yeah. Brevin Knight, the first point guard, the first leader of the Charlotte Bobcats from 2005 to 2007. Now
being verbally harassed at Harris Teeters because of how bad his team was.
Yeah, that's a true story. That's one we chronicled on Every Hornets Boxscore. Someone, I don't know, my camera went out of focus there. That's really I think, a metaphor for those Charlotte Bobcats teams. But yes, someone in Harris Teeter, Brevin Knight was there doing like a charity event for the Bobcats, and someone that's the level of animosity that George Shen really left behind. I don't think it had anything to do with the Bobcats. I think people were still peeved at how the Charlotte Hornets left, and they were taking it out on poor Brevin Knight, who had nothing to do with it. Here's the reveal of why I was looking up Flip Murray stats. Ronald Murray, Flip Murray, 2010, cup of coffee with the Charlotte Bobcats. And then Byron Mullins, number 22. He wore the double deuces. It all comes back to Byron Mullins. Lord Byron Mullins spent 2 seasons in Charlotte from 2012 to 2013. And then Brian Roberts. That's a good sicko brigade name, Brian
Very
Roberts.
good. Saw him at an airport one time.
There you go. Vernon Carey Jr. wore the double deuces, double quarter pounder.
Yeah, he would start for 3 minutes and then be, put in for or taken to the bench for PJ Washington.
And then finally, the person currently occupying the double deuces for the Charlotte Hornets is Xavier Sneed. I have a Sneed for speed.
So I know you want to go with Byron Mullins here, Doug. I know you do. You want to. I get it. He's got a great play. Everybody loves Byron Mullins, okay? Totally understand it. This one is very easy, though. As much as I love Flip Murray, Johnny Newman, I think I tabbed him as the most underrated Hornet in franchise history.
Wow.
I think it was Johnny Newman or maybe even Armin Gilliam, but I think I settled on Johnny Newman. This is someone with multiple 40-point games for the Charlotte Hornets. He played from 1990 to 1993, and then in that 93-94 season, he actually split some time, only played 18 games in that season, and then went to the Nets. But here were his totals. He averaged 16.9 points his first year with the Hornets, 15.3, 11.9, and then he would move on. But you don't need a lot of years played with this team in order to be like somewhere on the list, because longevity is not the name of the game to appearing on the list and being who wore it best. Bucket getter with 2 40-point games. Yeah, I think Johnny Newman might be the most underrated.
It pains me to agree with you, and I almost took this to YouTube because I think I could win a YouTube poll.
You honestly, I don't doubt that. I think you could probably. Byron Mullins would get more votes than Johnny Newman. I
think I could win the YouTube poll, so I almost rigged this in my favor. But here's why I didn't: because I respect Hornets history, as I think one of the premier Hornets historians. Honestly, in Charlotte, there aren't a lot of us that are trying to keep the memories alive from the good old days. Even the days before I even paid attention to this team. Like I was 2 or 3 years old when Johnny Newman was getting 16.9 points per game. Okay. So but I go back and I study it and I understand what happened. And if you go back and look at the context of that team, that 90-91 team, this was right after they got in the league. And as a lot of new franchises are, the Charlotte Hornets were miserable, and they were looking for ways to become not miserable as they acquired these good draft picks, but they understood keenly that it's not good enough, even in that era where your really good draft picks came in ready to contribute immediately, because these were 3-4 year college players. So these were guys ready to throw down in the NBA. But they understood keenly that you want to also surround them with some good veterans and make some moves to bring in guys. I wish this current organization understood that a little bit better. And that's how you set up your team for victory. And one of those players that again, didn't stick around for a lot of the major success of the LJ Zoe era, but someone that helped set up that era was Johnny Newman, because he took the Hornets offense from laughable to competitive. He was part of the reason that happened. And Johnny Newman was really, I agree with you, one of the more underrated pickups and one of the more underrated players in Hornets history if you go back and kind of study it.
Well, and by the way, just the 1 year where you started to have Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson on that team, and then eventually he would move on. But that 1 year, 92-93, he did average 12 points per game on above 52% shooting. Pretty efficient, not from three-point range, but this is the era where nobody was efficient from three-point range. And if you were inefficient, then you only took one. Johnny Newman, man, somebody that we reference every silly season, and every single time we say one of the more underrated guys. in franchise history.
Well, and now we've had 3 straight players that start with the letter J. So I don't know. That might be a good sign for JT Thor, who's going to be up next with the number 21. And we won't do it on this show because we got to wrap. But I just want to preview for who wore it best on the next show. We've got 12 players who wore the number 21. Okay. And there are a few J's. JT Thor, Jamal McGlure. But there are some interesting players in this 21 list. You will not want to miss the next who wore it best.
That is a former All-Star, Jamal McGlure. So
It's true.
maybe Jamal does have a pretty good shot to win who wore it best. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen today. Make your second listen game-to-game NBA every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game-to-Game covers every game from across the league with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game-to-Game on Locked On NBA, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. What a hell of a Friday show, man. I was just kind of recapping it in my brain. That's a lot of Bobcats for you. That's a lot of Bobcats. That'll do it for a Friday edition. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you on Monday.